Hey again guys, welcome back to the channel. I appreciate you tuning in. If you're new here, I'm Walt, more also known as Dan Wilson. As I mentioned many times, I run a small engine repair shop here in the garage, and I work on all sorts of stuff such as riding lawnmowers, push mowers, wood splitters, chainsaws, tillers, just about anything that comes up that needs repair. In one of my latest videos, I was mentioning to you guys a gadget we use here in engine diagnostic known as a compression gauge. And you may be familiar with one of these, and you may not be. If you're not, then that's why I'm here, to help you guys have a little more information about how this stuff works. So here's my compression gauge. It's pretty simple. It's got a dial on the front right here. Hope you can see it okay. On the side here is a pressure release valve. So once we pump up compression, you're ready to remove the gauge off the engine. We want to push this, relieves all the air pressure out of it. On the other end of this hose right here is a connector, and this screws directly into the spark plug hole on the engine. So obviously we've got to remove the spark plug. In this case, on this engine I'm getting ready to work on, I've already removed the spark plug, so I'm just about ready to go with it. Just want to show this to you guys. Now, since there are basically three different size of spark plug holes in various engines, this is a neat feature of this particular gauge. We take it apart right here, and we can see that it has one size right there for a smaller type spark plug. On the end right here is for kind of a mid-size. I'm not sure exactly what size it is. And of course we have our larger size out here on the end with O-rings in all positions, including there. So in this case, I believe I'm going to need the threaded end on the end of this. So I'm going to put that back on there, only hand tight. I'm going to push that O-ring back down just a little bit, make sure that seals up good. Okay, so in here in just a minute, I'm going to hook this up to this push lawnmower engine and run a quick compression test on that. In the process, I'll show you guys how that all works and why we do a compression test in the first place. Be right back. Okay guys, we're ready to go with the compression test right now. I got the gauge right here, and again, as I mentioned, I've already removed the spark plug out of this engine. There it is right there, because we need to screw our end of our compression gauge into the spark plug hole. I'm pretty confident I got the right end of it already fastened on here, so we'll just go for it here in a minute. One important thing, if you happen to have one of these, or if you're considering purchasing one of these, one little pointer I almost forgot to mention to you guys that makes threading your hose into your spark plug hole much easier. If you'll notice, right here on the end is a quick link, or quick connect link I should say. So what we can do here is just pull back on our quick connect, and off comes the gauge part of the assembly, just like that. Okay, by doing that, we have our hose end free and open. Makes it much easier to thread this into the spark plug hole without the gauge on it, which is why they design it that way. So hope you guys got a good angle on this. Let me see if I can maybe zoom in a little tighter, show you exactly what I'm doing here. So again, we just want to get started in the spark plug hole, and we'll make sure we get the threads lined up correctly so we don't cross thread anything. This will normally, if it's going in quite easily, then that usually is indicative that we have not cross-threaded anything. So again, we're just screwing into the spark plug hole on the engine. Again, this is just a small push lawnmower engine. This type gauge can be used on virtually any type of internal combustion gasoline-powered engine, including small engines on lawnmowers, other outdoor equipment, as well as automotive engines. So here it goes into the spark plug hole. And we're just going to tighten down, basically hand tight. I'm just going to snug it down. There's no reason to put a wrench on this. Just about like that. And all we're looking for here, guys, is so we get a good seal on that O-ring, so we don't have any compression loss at this point of entry right here. Okay, guys, so now we're ready to put our gauge end back on our hose. I hope you guys can see the gauge okay. And as I pull on the starter rope, I'm going to give it about 3 or 4 pulls. And we'll hopefully see this gauge get up to maybe at least 60, possibly up to about 80 psi of pressure for this size engine. So here we go. This little engine pumped up to right at 60 psi of compression, which for this size motor, in my professional opinion, is a very, very good compression rate. Now we're going to leave this gauge on here for about 20 to 30 or so minutes and do what we call a bleed down test. So when we come back, and this gauge is down to 0 after about 15 to 20 minutes, it means this engine is in bad need of repair. Okay guys, while we're doing the bleed down test portion of this diagnostic, I'm going to be looking for any signs of compression loss in this engine. Now some areas where we may have compression loss could be the piston rings. Those are the rings going around the piston, which is inside the cylinder. I'm not going to show you one right now because I'm not going to take this motor apart just to show you that. In a future video, if you're not familiar with pistons, I'll pull one apart and show you what I'm talking about. But again, we have piston rings going around the outside of the piston within the cylinder. If those are badly worn, we may have compression loss through the piston rings. Another factor could be the head gasket. That's the gasket that goes between the cylinder head and the engine. Sometimes those will rupture, get a crack in them. We can have compression loss through possibly the head gasket. Another problem area could be the valves. What we have there is an intake valve and an exhaust valve. Of course, the intake valve is what lets fuel and air mixture into the cylinder. The exhaust valve, of course, what lets the exhausted fuel back out of the engine. Pretty simple concept there. Sometimes those valves can get out of adjustment. Sometimes a valve spring might break. A lot of things can happen inside these motors. So here in just a minute, I'm going to show you some of the ways that I look for problem areas that could be a possible loss of compression within the engine. Okay guys, back at the compression gauge here. It's been now about 15 or so minutes since I cranked up the cylinder. We're showing about 60 psi of compression on this particular engine. Now, if there is an intake valve issue, such as the intake valve may be not adjusted properly, or it may have a broken spring, I mean, who knows? Here's one quick way you can do a compression test along with a bleed down test to find out where your compression loss is coming from. So what we're going to do in this case is, I'm simply going to come over here and I put my ear down very close to the carburetor, if I can get down here and do this. And I'm listening carefully to find out if I hear any air coming out through the carburetor. If I hear air coming out through here, it essentially tells me that we have an intake valve issue. So one of the next things I do, if you notice right over here on this side, is of course the muffler. I'm going to stick my ear down next to the muffler. Believe me, it's a lot of fun sticking my head down next to the floor like this is what I got to do. I'm listening to find if I hear any air coming out of the muffler. If I do hear air coming out of the muffler, it's most likely an exhaust valve issue. So that's a couple ways you can start troubleshooting an engine to find out where the compression loss is happening. Again, if it's an intake valve issue, you'll hear air coming out of the carburetor. If it's an exhaust valve issue, you'll most likely hear air coming out of the muffler. In the case of the head gasket or piston rings, that's a little hard to determine. So let's say if I'm seeing compression loss on the gauge, but I do not hear air coming from the carburetor, I do not hear air coming from the muffler, then it's almost always the head gasket or the piston rings or both. So anyway, just a few pointers, a few little tips on small engine repair. But one pointer I almost forgot to mention, if you do attempt to do this on your own, on your car, your truck, your SUV or whatever, which you're going to have more than one cylinder usually. Most small engines are like one cylinder, twin cylinder, and that's about it. But on a vehicle, a motor vehicle engine, you're going to have maybe 4, 6, possibly 8 cylinders. One important thing to keep in mind, if you do this on your own, on your vehicle, be sure and disable your ignition. You do not want the engine starting up while you're doing a compression test. On some of the older vehicles that still use distributor caps, you can simply pop off your distributor cap to keep the engine from starting during the test. On some of the newer vehicles that have electronic ignition, there are ways you can disable your ignition coil or by whatever means. But my main point is you must disable your ignition system so the engine does not start while you're doing the test, because all you're going to do is put the compression gauge into your spark plug hole on each cylinder that you're testing and just crank on the engine for about 3 to maybe no more than about 5 seconds. That's about a standard startup cycle. Well guys, that's about all I've got for right now. Really appreciate you guys checking out the video. Well, thanks some new subscribers just hopped on board in the last day or two. Glad to have you guys along. And if you're new to my channel, if you just found my channel on this particular video, again, I'm Walt Moore, also known as Dan Wilson. And I strongly encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube video channel. You can hit that little link right over there in the corner. And also hit that like button for me. Appreciate those likes. I appreciate you guys a lot. So thanks for checking this one out. And you guys take care and God bless. I'll check in with you on the next video.